thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, if that's true, then why is hoarding considered to be something that needs to be psychoanalyzed? I mean, surely there must be something about it that the world, society doesn't consider to be functioning. So,
well, I think that's fascinating. I mean, really, one way of thinking about this is that we don't think these objects mean anything.
right.
We think they're trash. But if they have meaning to an individual and don't circumscribe their life and don't cause them particular pain or loss or suffering, then, and even those things, who are we to define what pain or loss or suffering is, then why don't we just let people be and hoard or not, you know?
Right.
And I think, and maybe some of you who have experience of this in your family, I think the pain is often in the people who are closest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm surrounded by hoarders. I'm married to a hoarder. I've worked for a hoarder for 5 years. A very close older friend of mine is a hoarder, but they're also collectors. And you wouldn't go into their house and say they're hoarders, but they are hoarders, in fact. And, you know, in fact, one of them I'm thinking of is a 75-year-old man whose house is the most impeccable, artful house you would ever see. And you would walk in and the first thing you would say is, wow, what a collector. And he collects everything, but he is a hoarder. You know, he has 100 Pillsbury Doughboys from the 20th century. And he displays them all very beautifully. And the thing about all of these people is that their personalities are very similar in nature. And there are issues of perfectionism.
Yes.
There are issues of control.
Yes.
You know, I've been organizing my boss's house for 5 years. And she's gotten very good at organizing. But the issue of collecting stuff remains. So I would like, and I don't want to stop their behavior because I am obviously fascinated by it from my own experience. But I do see how there's a point where it becomes or dysfunctional, you know, in their lives. So I don't know, I just am throwing that out there as possibly a foil to saying, well, that's potatoes and potatoes, you know,
Right.
and maybe it's something else.
Right. Your collection is my hoarding.
You said something interesting. You at the very beginning, you said there's a disorder about this, and there was another word you used too. My first reaction was to kind of like, well, that sounds rather negative, but when I guess it becomes like a dysfunctional, you know, atmosphere where it may be unhealthy. I don't know. I'm just saying. Then there's this disorder, you know, as opposed to she's bringing skill to this person about organization to it, where they can still keep some of the stuff, but maybe in a fashion that, or you know, it's a little bit more.
Maybe when it totally consumes your life, then it's
Right.
right.
When you can't sleep in your bed anymore,
Yeah.
and you lay your head on a stack of pizza boxes, I think that's
You
when
can't air
you're
bottles.
over it, and you have to
There's a health issue there, too, right?
Right.
Well, that's what I mean by, you know.
That's like, yeah, people who have severe
Dysfunction.
hoarding will collect, I mean, you know, they keep everything,
Well,
like.
what about being dirty as opposed to being clean? And the class differentiates having money and not having money.
There you go.
Right, like you said that for years people have, or you know, for decades people have had, or cities have had families that are on the edge of town and their yards are littered with cars or whatever, or broken down things, versus the stereotype of a sophisticated person who has an art collection living in downtown, you know, the downtown of the city, but they are also a hoarder. Like, how is that dichotomy related? You know, like where does that intersect?
But it also,
What is the connection to these?
I kind
Sorry, I
of,
didn't mean to just.
no, but I kind of agree with what Gemma was saying in a way. It's like, who are we to make these things? But people get, you know, I may be happy living and sleeping on a bunch of pizza boxes, but there's ramifications to other people in their life, and you're not seeing it. And you know, what makes mental illness, you know, you're schizophrenic, you know, like, but you're happy being, you know. Yeah, exactly, you know, so, but there are ramifications for other people, and maybe that's what happens sometimes, is people need to get treatment or help in a way because the family needs that, you know, and it, you know, there's not always justice in a way.
How about politics like Imelda Marcos?
Yes, seriously.
That famous story.
What's
And
wrong
so-
with that? No.
But politically, it was okay for her.
Mhm.
And then there was a shift politically. And then she was this abusive person. Whereas she'd been accumulating those shoes for many, many years with no bad, you know, ramifications.
She's also using money too.
So, you know, if you think about the history of imperialism or a royal family, then there's a different standard, perhaps of like what's acceptable for them to accumulate.
Or Howard Hughes. You know, I think he was way down the line before somebody called him on it.
Yeah.
Because he had enough money that people weren't going to call him.
And he also had to hide behind, he hid and wore Kleenex boxes on his shoes. So, or for shoes. So
But he had somebody to go out.
he had somebody go out and get the Kleenex so he could
Right,
use it for
exactly.
everything. So,
Exactly.
and, you know, sat in his chair in the nude and whatever else he did. But,
Or at the beginning, what didn't you say there's just, a statistic where there are more wealthy people are classified as hoarders? Was that what?
Yeah,
And more women too, but
Yeah,
it was something
I
about
found that
social.
fascinating that both,
Because-
I mean, in a way it makes sense because they're more obsessional,
Yeah.
they're more kind of in their head, you know? But it's the statistic that I read somewhere, I think it was like 2003, 2006, is that hoarders tend to be better educated, that is, have more education than the general population, and also to have a higher socioeconomic.
Because I think it's interesting in contrast with the stories about the depression in the family and people growing up in
Right.
need and maybe still being in need and
Right.
keeping because they, you know, don't know if they'll need something, versus people who can throw something away and buy it the next day, buy the same thing, you know, like, so I think it's interesting.
Unconditional, you know.
Please.
Well, it is crazy and eccentric is money, right?
There's somebody back here.
Oh, yeah, I just keep having like the curiosity, like, okay, what are objects? You know, like, let's get down to the baseline. And if, you know, what is each person's relationship to the object world? And part of it doesn't feel so connected to objects, so I'll play around with me. It's like, oh, I like this object, so I'll care about it. But I know it's an object, so what's that in me that I know that if I'm having a deeper relationship with certain objects for myself, based on my own subjective meaning, I'm trying to feel something. You know, so I'm conscious of that. So I don't know. It's like we all have to have relationships with objects, and part of me isn't like I don't feel as much of a human because I watch everybody with the objects, and I'm kind of like, all right, we're learning. Like I lived in France, and they're very much like this is how we do it. We ritualize this object for this, and this goes there, and I'm like, really, you know, just kind of socialize. This is what being a human is, and this is how we are in our domesticated space with objects. And so this is the extreme of our obsessional relationship to that it's consuming and being cut off from the creating.
I keep thinking of, I don't know if anyone here saw Lars and the Real Girl.
Yeah.
There's a certain sense of what the community can tolerate, you know, and the community, if you tolerate certain behaviors, you know, and they make it normal and okay and help. And then there's other communities that don't tolerate those kind of behaviors, and I don't know why I'm thinking of it, but it is like we have these objects of it's what can you tolerate and what is okay and what do people around you think? Yeah,
I think it has something to do with rebellion as well.
say that again?
Rebellion,
Good.
and like a reaction to get a reaction out of people that they care about.
I think it would depend on the trauma and why people are doing